Hi, my name is Kazim Adegwega and this is Icons micro-cbt on Recipient objects in Exchange Server 2010. Now, what are recipient objects? A recipient refers to any mail-enabled object, that is an object with an email address assigned in Active Directory to which Exchange Server can route and deliver messages. Now, there are a number of recipient object types available to us in Exchange Server 2010 to work with. Now let's take a closer look at this recipient object types, shall we? The available recipient object type of Exchange Server 2010 include the user mailboxes, the mail users, the mail contact, resource mailboxes, mail-enabled security and distribution groups, dynamic distribution groups, linked mailboxes, and remote mailboxes. Now do keep in mind that this is a micro-cbt, and as a result there isn't enough time, so I'm going to be talking about just this first two, that is the user mailboxes and the mail user. Starting off with the user mailboxes, a user mailbox is an Active Directory user, and our Exchange server is responsible for hosting such a user mailbox. Whereas for the mail user is also an Active Directory user, but unlike the user mailbox, the Exchange server is not responsible for hosting such a user mailbox. So instead, the user prefers to go with a third-party email server such as Yahoo, Hotmail, or Gmail. The next question then is, how do we manage recipient object in Exchange Server 2010? Well, I'm glad you asked. You see, you can perform the Exchange recipient object management task using either the EMC, that is the Exchange Management Console, or the EMS, the Exchange Management Shell. Good. Now, enough preliminaries. Let's take a dive into the demo and let me walk you through how you create some of those recipient objects, shall we? The first tool that we're going to be working with here is the Exchange Management Console. And to create your recipient object using the Exchange Management Console, you need to expand the recipient configuration under the console tree. So after expanding it, you right-click Recipient Configuration and then you can choose your option. Another way to create recipient object is to do so under the Actions pane. So that after clicking Recipient Configuration, then you can choose the appropriate option under the Actions pane here. Let's click on the New Mailbox link to create a new mailbox. So I'm going to choose the type of mailbox that I want to create. I want to create right now a user mailbox, and I'll hit next. Do you want to create a mailbox for an existing user in Active Directory, or you want to use this wizard to create the user first in Active Directory and then mail enable that user? Let's go with the new option. So I'm going to specify, let's create a user called Wale Adenuga, and Wale Adenuga's logon's name is going to be wale.adenuga, and password will assign Wale Adenuga the generic password, and we force him to change password when next this user wants to log on, and we do so by checking this checkbox here. Also, if you want this user to be created inside a particular organizational unit in your Active Directory, you can do so by selecting that checkbox and then selecting the organizational unit of choice. So I'll click next. Next, we need to assign this user an alias. Not to worry, in a later video I'm going to be walking you through how to work with email address policies. For now, we'll choose the default options and we'll click on new to create this user. Right, so a mailbox is now being created for this user. Next, let's create a mail user. So I'll right click recipient configuration and then choose new mail user. This time we're going to work with existing user. let's create a mailbox for this user called Scott Tiger. So select Scott, click next. We need to give Scott an alias. Scott dot tiger is going to be his alias, and now we need to select his SMTP address. So if you remember the explanation that I made earlier, that a mail user, the Exchange server is not responsible for hosting a mail user's email. So instead, it prefers to use a third-party email server such as Gmail. So Scott's email is scott.tiger@gmail.com. We'll click OK, we'll click next, and then we'll click new. Right, so that's how we create recipient objects using the Exchange Management Console. So next, let me walk you through how you do the same using the Exchange Management Shell. First of all, if you need to query all the available mailboxes that you have on your Exchange server from the EMC, you work with the get mailbox commandlet, get mailbox, and then you press enter. And as you can see here, we have 3 mailboxes at the moment. So now let's create a mailbox for a user. We have this user called John Momo here. How do we mail enable that user? That user already exists in Active Directory, but we want to assign him a mailbox on our Exchange server right now. To do that, we'll type in enable mailbox, and then we'll type the identity switch. We'll specify our domain name. My domain name right now is Icons Bootcamp, and then we'll specify the user logon name, which happens to be John.Momor, and we press enter. Good. So I'm going to get mailbox again, and now as you can see we have 4 mailboxes. How do we create a mail user using the Exchange Management Shell? We're going to do so for an existing user. We have one user here called John Bull. So let's create a mail account for John Bull. The mail account is going to be a mail user, so that is, the Exchange server is not going to be responsible for hosting John Bull emails. So to do so, we do enable mail user. My enable isn't correct. Enable mail user, and we'll work with the identity switch. Is for John Bull, so my domain name comes first, Icons Bootcamp / John Bull, John.Bull. The next is the alias. Alias is still going to be John.Bull, and then his external email address is going to be John.Bull at Hotmail. That's John's Bull email address, hotmail.com, and then we can press enter. Right, so now we've created a mail user successfully using the Exchange Management Shell. Now this is it for this video on recipient object. I hope I've whet your appetite a little bit about the subject, and I would like to thank you for using micro-cbt.